The alien commander raised his weapon until the deathworld girl said, "Go on." I need practice. Then he learned that confidence in humans isn't arrogance, it's threat assessment with the safety margins already calculated. Let me tell you about the day I discovered that telling a human you're about to kill them is like warning a fusion reactor you're going to add more fuel. Spoiler alert, the reaction exceeds your expectations in ways that involve significant collateral damage and you wondering why you thought this was a good idea. My name is Commander Zethus Crawley, formerly of the Syndicate Enforcement Division, and I have conducted hostile operations for 18 standard cycles. I have led boarding actions against 47 different vessels, coordinated suppression of 23 colonial uprisings, and personally executed 31 individuals who posed threats to Syndicate authority. Point is, I know intimidation. I understand how fear works, what breaks someone's will to resist, what makes people surrender rather than fight hopeless battles. I have perfected the art of the threat display, the moment where you make someone understand they're outmatched and give them the choice between compliance and death. Most choose compliance. The smart ones, anyway. Then I met Corporal Maya Reeves, and discovered that humans from deathworlds don't process threats the same way civilized species do. They hear, "I'm going to kill you," and apparently interpret it as, "Please demonstrate why that's a bad idea." The operation was straightforward, at least in theory. The research station on Kepler 438b had stopped sending reports to Syndicate oversight, which meant either catastrophic systems failure or deliberate defiance. My team was sent to investigate, restore communications if possible, or neutralize the facility if it had gone rogue. Standard enforcement action that should have taken maybe 6 hours total. The station was small, 40 personnel, primarily scientific research focused on xenobiology and ecology. Minimal security, no military assets, staffed by researchers who had signed contracts acknowledging Syndicate authority and agreeing to regular oversight. They had missed 3 scheduled reports over 6 weeks, ignored attempts at communication, and activated defensive shields when our ship approached. That was defiance, clear violation of their operational agreements, and it justified Syndicate response. We breached the station's outer hull using standard military-grade cutting equipment, encountered no resistance at the breach point, and proceeded through the facility with weapons ready for hostile contact. The station appeared abandoned initially, no personnel in corridors or common areas, just empty spaces with signs of recent occupancy but no actual occupants. "They're hiding," my tactical officer Vren reported. Thermal scans show approximately 35 life signs clustered in the central research facility. "Defensive positioning, possibly armed, probably armed with lab equipment," I said dismissively. "Scientists playing at resistance. We breach, make arrests, restore order." Standard procedure. We reached the research facility's main entrance, a reinforced door designed more for containment than security. It was locked, obviously, but locks were trivial obstacles for military-grade equipment. We cut through in under 3 minutes and entered in standard breach formation. The researchers were indeed clustered in the central lab space, but calling their formation defensive was generous. They had overturned tables for cover, were holding various improvised weapons, and looked terrified. Except one. At the center of the group stood a human female, roughly 170 centimeters tall, lean build, wearing station coveralls with corporal's insignia that suggested she was security rather than research staff. She had dark hair pulled back in practical style, brown skin, and these dark eyes that tracked my team's entry with assessment rather than fear. Most notably, she was holding what looked like a standard-issue plasma rifle, military hardware that absolutely should not have been present on a civilian research station. "This is Commander Zethus Crawley, Syndicate Enforcement Division," I announced, my amplified voice echoing through the lab. "You are in violation of oversight agreements and have failed to respond to authorized communications. Surrender immediately and you will be detained for questioning. Resist, and we are authorized to use lethal force." The researchers looked at each other nervously, several starting to raise their hands in surrender. Then the human spoke. "No," she said simply. Her voice was calm, conversational even, like she was declining an invitation rather than defying armed military personnel. "No." I repeated, because surely I had misheard. "You understand we have legal authority here. You understand we outnumber you 8 to 1. You understand resistance is futile." "I understand you think those things," the human said. "But your legal authority is based on contracts signed under duress, your numbers don't matter as much as you think they do, and resistance is only futile if we're unable to resist effectively." Since we're very capable of effective resistance, your entire premise is flawed. She shifted her stance slightly, and I noticed the plasma rifle was pointed casually in my direction. Not aggressively, just positioned. Here's a counterproposal. You leave our station, report back to your syndicate that we've declared independence, and everyone survives this encounter. We're not rejoining your protection racket disguised as legitimate government, but we're also not interested in unnecessary violence. That's not how enforcement operations work, I said, signaling my team to spread out and establish better firing positions. You don't get to negotiate terms. Sure I do, the human said. Because I'm holding a weapon, I know how to use it, and I'm willing to use it if you force the issue. That's the basic foundation of negotiation, mutual capability to inflict harm combined with preference to avoid that outcome. 1 rifle against 8 trained soldiers, I pointed out. You can't win this fight, can't I? The human asked, and something about her tone made my threat assessment instincts activate. You're making assumptions based on incomplete information. That's tactically unsound. What information am I missing? How many of your soldiers I can drop before you reach cover? How much ammunition I have, what other weapons are present in this facility, whether I'm the only security personnel on this station, how much combat experience I actually have, and whether I'm bluffing about being willing to shoot. She smiled slightly. That's a lot of unknowns to base your attack on, Commander. She was right, unfortunately. I didn't know any of those factors, and my tactical assessment was based on assumptions rather than confirmed intelligence. You're one person, I said. Even if you have combat training, you're still outnumbered and outgunned, maybe, the human acknowledged. But I'm from Earth, Commander. Class 12 Deathworld. Everything there tries to kill you, so humans learn to kill back with remarkable efficiency. I've been training for combat since I was 16 years old. 8 years of military experience, including 3 deployments to actual war zones. I've been shot at by people much better equipped than you, and I'm still here while they're not. Boasting doesn't change the tactical situation, neither does threatening, the human countered. But since you brought up tactics, let me offer some analysis. Your team entered in standard breach formation, which means predictable positioning. You're using syndicate standard equipment, which I'm familiar with. Your armor has weak points at the joints and neck seal. Your plasma rifles have a 3-second delay between trigger pull and discharge. And most critically, you've never fought anyone who actually wanted to kill you. She let that hang in the air for a moment. You're enforcers, Commander. You intimidate civilians and suppress uprisings by poorly armed colonists. You've never faced a trained soldier from a death world who has spent years learning how to kill efficiently. Your tactical experience is crowd control. Mine is warfare. That's not boasting. That's threat assessment. I felt my confidence waver slightly, which was unacceptable. I commanded this situation. I had authority, numbers, training, legal backing. One human with a rifle shouldn't make me hesitate. I raised my weapon, pointing it directly at the human center mass. Final warning. Surrender or I will shoot you where you stand. The human looked at my weapon, then back at my face, and her expression shifted into something that I would later recognize as anticipation. Go on, she said quietly. I need practice. For just a moment, I hesitated. Something about the way she said it, the complete absence of fear, the almost eager tone, made every one of my combat instincts scream warnings about predators and traps and situations that looked simple but were actually catastrophically dangerous. Then my training overrode my instincts and I pulled the trigger. What happened in the next 4 seconds changed my entire understanding of human combat capability and why Deathworld species should never be underestimated regardless of size or apparent vulnerability. My plasma rifle discharged with the standard 3-second delay between trigger activation and plasma bolt release. In that fraction of a second, the human moved. Not dodging exactly, more like she had predicted where I would aim and was already relocating before the bolt fired. The plasma passed through the space where she had been standing, scorching the wall behind her. Her return shot had no delay. Her rifle was already aimed, already firing, and the bolt hit my weapon directly, superheating the casing and making me drop it with burned hands before it could explode. While I was processing weapon loss, she had already transitioned targets. Second shot hit Vren's rifle, same result. Third shot hit the soldier to my left. Fourth shot hit the soldier to my right. Not killing shots, she was targeting weapons, disabling my team's capacity to return fire without actually killing anyone. 4 targets, 4 shots, maybe 2 seconds elapsed time. The precision was impossible. Combat accuracy shouldn't allow that kind of performance under stress against moving targets while under fire yourself. That's 4, the human said, her voice still calm. I have 36 rounds remaining in this magazine, and 3 additional magazines. You have 4 team members still armed. Basic math says I win this engagement. My remaining soldiers had gone to ground, seeking cover behind lab equipment and structural elements. Smart tactical response, but it confirmed what the human had just demonstrated: we were outmatched by a single opponent with superior skill. Ceasefire. I called out, making the hand signal for tactical withdrawal. Stand down, all units. Smart choice, the human said, though her rifle remained ready. Now we can have that conversation about you leaving our station peacefully. You attacked Syndicate enforcement personnel, I said, my burned hands throbbing. That's an act of war. I defended my station from armed intruders who refused to leave when asked politely, the human corrected. That's self-defense. The fact that your Syndicate enforcement doesn't give you authority to invade sovereign territory and threaten civilians. We declared independence. You're now foreign military conducting hostile operations. I'm within my rights to defend against that. The Syndicate doesn't recognize your independence. The Syndicate cannot recognize whatever it wants, the human said. But if they send more enforcement teams, those teams will get the same reception you did. We're done being a captive research facility. We're done with oversight that's just exploitation with paperwork. We're staying independent, and we're willing to defend that independence. She gestured with her rifle toward the exit. So you can report back that enforcement failed, or you can report back that enforcement was repelled with prejudice. Your choice. But either way, you're leaving our station now. I should have refused. Should have called for backup, should have escalated to orbital bombardment, should have done anything except retreat from a single human with a rifle. But looking at her stance, her complete confidence, her demonstrated capability, I made a tactical decision. We withdrew. My team retreated through the breach point, returned to our ship, and departed the system. I filed a report describing the facility as too heavily defended for cost-effective suppression and recommended alternative approaches. The Syndicate approved my assessment and abandoned enforcement operations against that particular station. 3 months later, I resigned from Syndicate service, citing philosophical differences with operational priorities. The real reason was simpler: I had lost all confidence in Syndicate tactical assessments and threat evaluation procedures. If they were that wrong about one human on a research station, what else were they wrong about? I eventually found work as an independent security consultant, specializing in threat assessment for facilities operating outside Syndicate space. My first major client was, ironically, the research station I had failed to suppress. Commander Crawley, Corporal Reeves said when we met again under very different circumstances. I hear you're looking for legitimate work. Interested in helping U.S. design security protocols for an independent research collective. You humiliated me, I said. Why would you want to work with me? Because you learned, Reeves said simply. You backed down when you realized the fight wasn't worth winning. You filed reports that prevented orbital bombardment of civilians. You made ethical choices when you could have made vindictive ones. That suggests you're worth trusting. I'm still the person who tried to suppress your independence. You're the person who was doing a job for an organization you believed was legitimate, Reeves corrected. Then you learned better and changed your behavior accordingly. That's called growth. We value that. I took the job. Spent the next 5 years working with the research collective, designing security systems, training personnel, helping coordinate defense against various threats. And I learned extensively about human capabilities, combat doctrine, and why deathworld species approached conflict so differently than civilized ones. The thing about Earth, Reeves explained during one training session, is that violence is normal there. Not constant, but common enough that humans evolved psychological frameworks for managing it. We're not inherently aggressive, but we're very capable of controlled aggression when necessary. And we're extremely good at threat assessment because our survival has always depended on knowing what can kill us and how to kill it first. That day in the research lab, I said. When I threatened you. You weren't bluffing about being willing to shoot. Of course not, Reeves said. Bluffing is what you do when you're not actually prepared to follow through. I was completely prepared. You were threatening me and everyone I was responsible for protecting. That's unacceptable. So I gave you the choice to leave peacefully or experience the consequences of forcing combat. You chose wisely, you said. I need practice. What did that mean? Exactly what it sounded like, Reeves said. I train constantly, but training against actual threats is more valuable than range practice. If you had forced combat, I would have gained useful experience in real-world threat response. Simultaneously protecting civilians and neutralizing armed hostiles. That's valuable practice for security personnel. You were eager for the fight. I was prepared for the fight, Reeves corrected. There's a difference. Eager implies emotional investment. I was professionally interested in the training opportunity but preferred peaceful resolution. When you have confidence in your capabilities, conflict becomes opportunity for practice rather than existential threat. That's what deathworld experience teaches you. That's insane. That's survival, Reeves said. Earth taught humans to treat danger as manageable challenge rather than reason to panic. Everything on our planet is dangerous, so we learn to be more dangerous than everything else. Then we learn to control the capacity and deploy it selectively. That's not insanity. That's highly functional adaptation to hostile environment. I thought about that conversation many times over the following years. Thought about how humans process threats differently because they came from an environment where threats were constant. Thought about how that shaped their psychology, their confidence, their willingness to confront rather than flee. The alien commander raised his weapon until the deathworld girl said, "Go on." I need practice. Then everyone learned that human confidence isn't bravado, it's accurate threat assessment combined with realistic evaluation of their own capabilities. When humans say they're ready for a fight, they're not boasting. They're providing fair warning about what happens if you proceed. My name is Commander Zethus Crawley, and I used to think authority came from position and firepower. Now I understand that real authority comes from competence and willingness to deploy that competence when necessary. Corporal Reeves demonstrated both by defeating an entire enforcement team with precision that made our numbers irrelevant, then offering peaceful resolution that allowed everyone to survive with dignity. That wasn't cruelty or aggression. That was professional threat management by someone from a death world who understood violence intimately and chose to use it minimally while making it absolutely clear she could use it maximally if circumstances required. The commander raised his weapon expecting submission. The death world girl offered him education instead, delivered through demonstration of capability that made his weapon irrelevant and his threats empty. And somehow, that education transformed a syndicate enforcer into an independent security consultant who understood that the most dangerous beings are the ones who don't need to prove they're dangerous because everyone who matters already knows.